everybody, it's AJ of the Mighty Glue Stick. How's it going? Nice to see you again. It's been a good week, actually. I hope your week has been fine. Today I'm going to be covering the phase spider. It's characterized as a large monstrosity, which means it's basically an animal with extra trimmings. It's got some sort of supernatural ability which sets it aside from other creatures. Not that just being a giant spider is bad enough. No, this thing's got an extra little aspect to it which makes it a real nightmare. So stat-wise, it's got an armor class of 13, natural armor. It's got hit points of 32. It's got a speed of 30 feet and climb speed of 30 feet. So it can scuttle around on pretty much any surface that's not basically smooth as glass. Which makes it a difficult foe in caverns and things like that because it will often come at you from odd angles. It can spin a web. It is a web walker. So it ignores movement in restrictions caused by its or other webbing. So that's any webbing. So you can find this in conjunction with other giant spiders. It may take advantage of other spiders' webs to spring its ambushes. It may not set a web itself, but quite often it's depicted in miniatures and things, particularly the official miniature of Wizards of the Coast had it in a weird looking web, but it just spins ordinary looking web. It has the body structure of an ordinary type spider apart from a couple of interesting features. One is its coloration, in that it's typically it's a very pale spider, almost translucent, but it's got blue tinges and patterns to it. And it only has 2 eyes, which is very unusual for a spider, which means that it may have some sort of non-prime material origin or an origin aside from the normal prime material world. So these things are, I would imagine, one of the creatures which is, first of all, natural spiders in our own real world are everywhere. They're one of the few creatures which you can find pretty much anywhere on the earth, for the reason being that they can ride webs. So if you've ever seen the little, we call them in New Zealand money spiders. What they do is when they're quite small in size, they never get really big, and they spin out a long thread of web and they let it drift in the breeze, and as soon as the breeze catches it, they let go and they ride the web filament through the air. Now that action can take them all the way into the upper atmosphere, to the very limits of the atmosphere, and they're one of the few creatures which can basically survive entry into the borders of space and then fall back down to the ground. They actually freeze and unfreeze again and can be found on every continent on the earth as a result of that. So phase spiders take this one step further, and they have learned an ability, a magical ability, which allows them to phase out of reality into the border ethereal plane. And from there, they can dip back into the prime material plane once again and nab targets and take them back and eat them at their leisure in the ethereal plane. Or possibly they can relocate themselves to all sorts of other planes of existence through going further into the deep ethereal plane and then back to other border ethereal planes through portals to other realities, which means that phase spiders are potentially can be found everywhere. So that makes them very interesting, particularly if you're running a multi-planar campaign. So other stats: they've got a strength of 15, dexterity of 15, constitution 12, intelligence of 6, which is high for an animal, wisdom of 10, and a charisma of 6. So these are pretty sneaky. They've got a stealth of +6, dark vision out to 60 foot, and a passive perception of 10. They don't have any languages, they cannot speak. They have a challenge rating of 3. Their special abilities, aside from being able to run around on any surfaces, including upside down, without needing to make any ability checks, is their ethereal jaunt as a bonus action. So this is in addition to any movement or attacks that they have. The spider can magically shift from the material plane to the ethereal plane or vice versa as a bonus action. So it can do it at will. It can do it in between actions. It's amazing. So this thing is phasing from an outside perspective. For those who are not familiar with the ethereal plane, that is, you could make an Arcana check to actually figure out what this thing is doing. It would seem like it's teleporting, much like Nightcrawler, except instead of going bamf and sucking in some air where it leaves, it basically just fades in and out of existence as its body becomes immaterial. Now, one of the aspects of the ethereal plane as opposed to the astral plane, in the astral plane you can carry physical objects in there, so the silver sword, that sort of thing, but any action of going into the ethereal planes turns you into ethereal stuff. Basically, you become a dream. You become a potential thing. You become a pattern, like the Matrix, a program that travels into the ethereal plane. Because the ethereal plane is like the blank slate that demiplanes and prime material planes are created from. So it's the drawing board that draws the pattern, the framework of the potential, the spiritual aspect of everything, and then its physical aspect is created as a plane, either a demiplane or a prime material plane, or whatever. And as a result, it's the medium that all of the planes of existence exist inside of. So you could say it's the space between spaces. It's the area that allows gods to exist in multiple places at one time by basically extruding themselves through the ethereal plane into all sorts of different planes of existence, and they would have some sort of mechanism of tying all of that together. But I'll talk about gods in a later video. For the phase spider, it can't exist forever in the ethereal plane. It's not its home dimension. It is actually a prime material creature, but that aspect of it being able to move into the ethereal plane gives it that extra additional movement medium and protection that turns it into an apex predator wherever it goes. It can escape from harsh environments by basically jaunting into the ethereal plane and scuttling away. And from an outsider perspective, it would seem like it can teleport at will and move around whilst teleporting. There are means of stopping its ethereal jaunting. For instance, in the ethereal form, you can't move through very, very dense solid objects such as lead or gold, lead particularly, and I would imagine uranium or possibly even adamantium. And you can't move through living objects. Living objects they emit a soul spiritual energy which forms a barrier which protects their ethereal identity, integrity. And that also exists for ethereal creatures. So for the rest of, in ethereal form, it would seem like they're just seeing the Matrix version of reality. When they are on the border ethereal, they can see the program as it's running, sort of thing. So to them, everything seems ephemeral, hollow, just information that they can move through. The physicality of things doesn't form a barrier to them. They can move through solid objects, but they cannot move into another operating program such as a living being, and they can't move into very dense data such as lead or gold. But everything else is fair game. There are magical means of stopping that as well. Magicians have a means of creating... sometimes it's an alchemical, but usually it's a magical means of creating an artificial spiritual barrier that can catch ethereal creatures. And if you are aware that this thing is traveling ethereally, it's possible to throw a living net. Particularly if you're a druid, you could capture it with vines and things like that. If it's captured by vines, it can't escape, even in ethereal form, because it's surrounded by living things. So that's a very good thing to do. Even if you, for instance, if you get a net and you cover it in fresh living blood and then throw it over a phase spider, it will not be able to escape because the blood is technically still alive. It won't die for several minutes until the corpuscles and things like that actually die. So it's technically alive. In combat, it has a bite attack, which is +4 to hit, reach of 5 feet. One creature gets 7 points of piercing damage, and the target must make a DC 11 Constitution saving throw or take 18 poison damage on a failed save. Now, this is a paralytic poison. It's a potent paralytic poison that even if you save, you take half of that damage, and on a if the poison damage reduces the target to 0 hit points, the target is, instead of dying outright, it becomes stable, but poisoned for 1 hour, and essentially you're just paralyzed. And even after regaining the hit points, you remain paralyzed while poisoned in this way. So the poisoning it takes effect once the creature's normal hit points are reduced to 0, and then it stays in effect for an hour. So that's pretty nasty. It's a pretty effective poison, and it's one that would have a high value if you could retain its potency after you're extracting it from the phase spider. So you would need some sort of special alchemical medium for capturing that venom to keep it effective. So if you were specifically hunting a phase spider for taking that venom, you would have an alchemical flask already prepared, and you would have living nets, or perhaps nets that are covered in some sort of goopy serum or something that contains, say, algae or moss or fungus or something that forms a living barrier that it can't jaunt out of and escape from etherically. So yeah, in there, other than that, they basically act like any other giant spider. They lay eggs. Time passes normally in the ethereal plane, so it is possible to actually lay eggs in the ethereal plane and gestate them as per normal. Border ethereal planes are generally a lot safer than the deep ethereal plane, where creatures exist which actually prey upon living spiritual entities. So, and of course, the deep ethereal is incredibly vast. It's ridiculously vast, and it contains really, really weird and ancient things, and things that are dislocated from time and space, and things from realities which don't mesh up particularly well with the prime material plane. So things that are from the far realm, for instance, can float around in the deep ethereal. So phase spiders probably don't venture there unless they've got a very good reason. Say they're escaping from something which has chased them into the border ethereal. Other than that, they basically hang out in the prime material plane. They move quite frequently through the border ethereal. That would be their main means of travel. And they observe situations, locations in the primary material plane where they've got a good chance of ambushing a living creature. Because they're of large size, they would concentrate mainly on small creatures such as rabbits, voles, ferrets, weasels, sheep, dogs, cats, that sort of thing, and children. But given the opportunity, they will prey upon living human adults as well. I would say one great way would be to introduce these things into hospitals or somewhere where sick humans are basically left vulnerable and recuperating from illness. So this would be a cleric's temple or something like that, some sort of holy order where they're performing healing. And this would be a great spot if I was a phase spider within my intelligence of 6 and my wisdom of 10. I would say, a nice concentration of damaged and disabled humans. I can easily pluck them out of their bed at night with barely a sound and no trace of where they've gone. Pluck them into the ethereal plane with me, drag them to a safe location, say the attic of such a place, or some sort of sealed vault beneath the place, and deposit them there to feed on at my leisure. Where have the bodies gone? Well, some investigation of the place, say if you're going into a ruin, thinking that perhaps some sort of creature underneath the place has been coming up and nabbing them, you may discover a sealed vault with a big pile of bodies. How did they get there? No idea. Probably something that can phase through normal matter, and those who make a particularly good check or have pieced it together may be on the lookout for phase spiders, particularly if these victims are covered in webs. It doesn't have any sort of web encasement rules here for the phase spider, but I would say that if you want to borrow some rules from another spider creature that can use web as a weapon, or to encase somebody in a cocoon, definitely use that. And if you've got any miniatures and things like that for webbed creatures or piles of eggs and things like that, put that in the lair of a phase spider as well. They work in particularly well by themselves as an assassin type creature. They are basically untrainable because they are used to having complete freedom, and they don't like hanging out in the prime material plane very long. They are used to the subjective reality, gravity of the ethereal plane. When you're in the ethereal plane, there is a sense of direction up and down and such, but the movement is caused by force of will. This is probably one reason why the wisdom score and the intelligence of the phase spider is slightly higher, because it has to deal with two radically different environments that it lives in day to day. So it is also adept at flight. If for any reason the phase spider is put in a situation where it has a magical means of flight, which basically just requires will to send it in any direction, it will already be a very capable hovering and diving fighter, able to do flyby attacks and things like that. And fighting it on the ethereal plane is a dangerous prospect, because this thing can move equally well in the ethereal plane as it does in the prime material plane. And that's one reason why with its spider climb, it will attack you from any direction that it sees fit, using its web and things to come at you from angles and things. It doesn't just attack you by running along the ground or leaping off an object. It will come down like a ninja and grab you from above or from below. It will come out of the ground. It will phase through, seemingly phase through solid matter to attack you from walls and things like that. It will also come at you from the water or from out of a fireplace, anywhere where you're not expecting it. In fact, coming out of a fireplace, a roaring bonfire is a great idea. It doesn't really hurt the phase spider, because it just sees the ethereal fire and then runs through it and then pops out the other side without it actually being burned. But from anybody else's perspective, you wouldn't be looking at the fire for a source of potential threat of a giant spider. So it would catch you unawares, even if you're in the middle of combat. By this thing basically doing that, it would phase out, make a movement, and then phase back in to complete the movement and attack you. There's no reason why not. Layer effects for phase spiders could be, you could have phaselings, baby spiders, which are also attacking you from all sorts of different directions. If it's a mama spider, there could be up to 50 to 100 baby spiders there, making a carpet of difficult terrain and biting, nabbing nastiness. And include, well, you could rule that the baby spiders don't have as potent a venom, but spiders pretty much have the ability to create poisonous venom from birth. And also, we assume that the phase spider creates eggs and things. They may not. They may actually give birth to live young. The young may actually cluster on and run around on the mother spider. So you could have that a giant mothership phase spider has actually got lots of smaller, say house cat sized baby spiders crawling on it, holding onto it as it jaunts to and from the prime material and ethereal worlds. So yeah, that's a potential as well. Anyway, that's more than enough on this relatively simple creature. I hope that's given you some inspiration for some possible encounter ideas. Now, people have requested a hint for what's coming up next. I will see if I can forge a creature for you that will capture your interest. Another player race, perhaps. Maybe that was a little bit too easy. I'll catch you again soon, everybody.